Welcome to the CANIE Climate Dialogues, the podcast at the intersection of international education and climate action. I am your host, CJ Tremblay. Today, we are going to be talking about all things COIL. COIL has been talked about in the international education sector for a while now. We keep hearing about it more and more. A session here, a webinar series there, a virtual workshop. And yet the term COIL can be intimidating or ambiguous to some practitioners who are learning about what it is. So for starters, what I can tell you is that COIL means and stands for Collaborative Online International Learning. At both the North American CANIE Climate Action Summit in May and the European Summit in November, we had presenters on COIL from two different perspectives. And during both those sessions, we had so many questions from the audience who wanted to hear more and unpack those topics. So we are so glad to have both those presenters back with CANIE as guests on the podcast today. So Simone Hackett and Keiko Ikeda, everybody. Oh, the crowd goes wild. So I'm really excited to get into it because today's going to be fun. I'm happy to welcome my CANIE co-host today, a woman that I got to work with while organizing the European Summit in November. She was a presenter and in our planning and discussion meetings shared a lot of really interesting perspectives and was really generous with her time and her knowledge. And I quickly came to admire her. And also her accent makes my ears really happy. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Simone Hackett. Simone was born and raised in Ireland, but has been living and working in the Netherlands for more than a decade. Simone works at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, where she is a senior lecturer and also head of internationalization for the Faculty of Health and Sports. Simone has been developing and teaching COIL courses since 2013. And in addition to this, she is currently working on her PhD at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Her research focus is on virtual exchange, COIL. It's really great that we've got her to talk to us today. Simone's also a leading member of the European Association for International Education and regularly gives conference presentations on topics related to internationalization of education. So it's super, super awesome. Simone, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Hi, how's it going? Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
It is so good to have you here. Where are you joining from today?
I'm joining from the Netherlands. So it's a very cold morning in the Netherlands. We have a really cold snap here and it was -7 here. So that's really cold. There's a lot of snow outside, very unusual for the Netherlands for this time of year.
Goodness. I love when you're like, I'm from the Netherlands. I'm calling from the Netherlands when you have like this beautiful Irish accent that I talk about, like makes my ears so happy, which is like such a fun, beautiful thing about like the global international ed sector where people find themselves.
I got to know about CANIE, I think around 2 years ago, and I'm on the European Association for International Education. And I'm on the conference program committee of the EAE, and I saw a proposal coming through from Ilse Lamont on sustainable internationalization. I wanted to personally put more focus on sustainability within the conference. So when I saw her proposal come through, I got very excited about this. And of course, I reached out to her to see how we could connect and maybe bring her into the conference as well. And that's when she told me all about CANIE, and I got involved in it. And that brings us to the summit in Europe, in which she also asked me to do a session on COIL at the summit. And that was fantastic. And it resulted in so many like-minded people being connected and building bridges as well, which is magical. So that's my how I got involved with CANIE, I suppose.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so what is your driver? Like something about reading Elsa's proposal just like clicked, right? Because we talk about this all the time. Like it's not as common as you would think the common sense of wanting to take care of our environment. So what is it that sort of had you always been thinking about sustainability in the sector, and the fact that it perhaps international wasn't as sustainable and all of a sudden it just sort of clicked, or was it a aha moment right away?
I think it was kind of it was the right time, right place moment. I think for me, I was quite complacent about sustainability in the past. I knew, it was an issue, but I was thinking, oh yeah, that's far away and somebody else will take care of that, But as I started reading that Uninhabitable Earth book by David Wallace Wells, and that's really when it's such a powerful book, explaining what the consequences of global warming will be on the planet. And this really hit home to me, and it woke me up, changed my entire mindset and my behavior in relation to sustainability. And as an international educator, I thought, okay, I can't be part of the problem. I need to be part of the solution. And that's when I started really reading more about it, trying to change my own behavior, embedding more topics on sustainability and global warming within the courses I teach. And also, I'm involved in developing and teaching COIL courses anyway. And I thought, okay, this is just, quite obvious that this is a way in which we can offer our students an international experience without encouraging them to fly abroad. So, for me, it was very obvious development, I think.
And was that before or after sort of you were involved with COIL?
After. So, I've been involved in COIL since 2013, and my interest in environmental sustainability, that was, I started getting serious about that around 3 years ago.
Okay.
So around that time.
It's super interesting that you've been working in this space about that really has the potential to dramatically decrease the carbon footprint of the sector in which you work, but you hadn't really made that connection, or you were still thinking about it from
But I think it comes from this. I didn't make the connection then, but it comes from the point that I wanted to focus on internationalization at home. So for my students who don't go abroad, who can't go abroad, so COIL is a tool in which you can help students develop intercultural competencies when they cannot go abroad or they haven't gone abroad. So I think that, given that, then it was just a coincidence that these two came into play.
Well, lucky us. That's awesome. And on the topic of connections, you actually know our next guest, right? So you and Keiko know each other.
Yeah, we go way back. So Keiko and I met in 2016, and we presented at the European Association of International Education conference back then. And then we also did another session for ASAN as well on COIL, Virtual Exchange. And our universities also have partnered up to develop COIL courses, teach COIL courses together as well. So our paths are always crossing.
Unbelievable. Dear listeners, I promise you I did not know this when I asked Simone and COIL and Keiko to join on the COIL episode. So what you are in for is going to be awesome, because these two women know each other well, know this subject very deeply. And I'm so excited to have you here. So excited to have Keiko here. So let's bring on Keiko. Keiko Ikeda is a professor in the Division of International Affairs and KU-COIL Coordinator at Kansai University. Recently, she has taken the role as Principal Project Manager for the Inter-University Exchange project funded by MEXT from 2018 to 2022 called COIL Plus Program to Develop Global Career Mindsets. Keiko is the Vice Director for the newly established organization at Kansai University, the Institute for Innovative Global Education. She has a PhD from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, specializing in Japanese linguistics, foreign language education, and conversation analysis. Her interests in the international education field are internationalization at home, constructing active learning programs, collaborating with universities overseas. Some of her recent appointments include in November 2020 being the expert group member for Asian European Foundation and the expert group on inclusive learning and teaching in a digital world, as well as in December 2020, the IIE American Academy of International Education. Can't think of another person that I would rather have on this podcast right now to join us. This is so awesome. Keiko, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on a podcast today. Really appreciate it. I hope we can enjoy the session today.
Yeah, so happy to have you here. We didn't have a chance to have you live on our summit in North America because it was like 3 a.m. your time. But you sent a fantastic presentation. So for those of you who haven't watched it, be sure to check it out on YouTube. But I'm so excited that you're able to join us today. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you sort of came to know about CANIE and be involved in presenting at our summit?
Okay, so just a little bit of my background, how I ended up being what I do at the moment. So I started as a someone who was into what's called conversational analysis, and I was doing human-computer interaction analysis from sociological perspective. And my PhD was actually on a political discourse analysis. So it was all communication study. And then when I started to take up on my faculty position, I got into doing a blended learning, meaning that adapting ICT and IT tools into the physical brick and mortar classroom. And then I was doing that for a while, and then until 2014. And then at that time, I got encounter with John Rubin, who's the former director for the COIL Center. And that's how I got to know COIL. So that's where I started and promoting what I do and doing what I'm doing right at the moment. I got to know CANIE through someone at the San Diego State University, Eddie West. He was formerly at UC Berkeley. So we met each other as a senior international officer who goes to conventions like NAFSA. So we were the regulars there. And then I started to talk to him, see if the Berkeley is interested in, starting up a COIL practice with the Kansai University. And that's how I started it. And he got to know about the COIL, and he was very heavily involved in the activity. That's how I got to had the opportunity to actually do a presentation at the CANIE.
Amazing. And so I've said this many times. I come from the service provider background. Anyone wants to talk about marketing, conferences, working with institutions, connecting with students, I'm your girl. But pedagogical topics, working with an institution, driving transformation, exploring new ways to educate and create global citizens, that's outside of my wheelhouse. So it is an incredible privilege to have you both on the pod. Since more than any episode to date, I'm just going to be the girl asking questions. So much of this is new to me, and I am hopeful that I will be able to learn something, but mostly that our listeners, because there are listeners, which is still so cool and crazy, will also learn something. So I think we're just going to dig right in. So I'm going to start a question with Simone, just the basic, and telling us a little bit about the difference between COIL and virtual exchanges. Are they the same thing? How does that go?
Well, this is opening a can of worms, right, with the terminology of virtual exchange and COIL. But how it is starting to form is that virtual exchange is actually the umbrella term. And of course, Keiko, if you have a different perspective, you should jump in here as well. Virtual exchange is the umbrella term for a lot of different initiatives that involve online collaboration amongst students or teachers or facilitators. And under this umbrella, you will have initiatives such as collaborative online international learning, COIL, but also intercultural dialogue as well. And these initiatives have different, they involve different types of curriculum design in how the courses are designed, how the assignments students partake are designed, and also the learning experience, of the student as well. and the role of the teacher. So that's basically what it is in a nutshell. And if you want me to go further into COIL, I can, and what that initiative involves. Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
Well, COIL is I'd say it's a tool which adds an international dimension to a regular course. And regular course, we're talking about in the past face-to-face courses, which would happen in the classroom. So you'd add this online dimension to this course, which would help students develop their intercultural competencies. And it would involve two lecturers who are geographically separated from two different universities coming together and finding each other, coming together and developing a joint assignment together that they would give their students. And the students on both sides would, normally speaking, of course, there's different ways to do this as well, but normally speaking, they would group their students together, so into pairs. So maybe let's say you have a Dutch student and a New York student who would be paired together online, or maybe even groups of students, 3 Dutch and 3 American students, New York students, who would be grouped together. And in these groups, they would complete the assignment, the collaborative assignment that their lecturers have developed together. And they would complete this assignment over around, the length of it depends, but usually 4 to 10 weeks. And during this period, this is where the learning happens, where they try to complete the assignment together. They run into challenges and they have to overcome these challenges, and that's where the learning occurs. And these could be challenges to do with the discipline, but also challenges to do with communication, intercultural communication. And so this is basically what COIL is. And Keiko, maybe you have something more to add to that?
Oh, wow, that was a beautiful definition. And I think there are starting to have the bilateral COIL, and also in addition to it, the people started to go a little bit advanced, meaning including the third institution as well.
Yeah.
So having a multilateral COIL has also been very interesting and challenging to do a collaborative project all together with the more institutions, but yet it has a very good fruit coming out of it as well.
Beautiful. So thank you for that. What I heard from an institution perspective, and I do want to dig into the student perspective, and there's a lot of moving parts, it sounds like, from the development of it to the partnerships to the actual course work development. So, that obviously implies a lot of challenges. So to Keiko, I would ask, what is the benefit to the institution? Why take on that challenge?
Okay, so I have to answer this question in 2 parts. So before COVID and with the COVID, I guess that's pretty much a big line there that I have to draw. So before COVID, I used to say several things. It's almost like a very important component of the things whenever I talk about COIL. So first, merit, I guess benefit, I would probably say, is that you, as an international educator, you get to actually build a great partnership. Building internationally, and establish not a doormat agreement, but a highly active international cooperation through educational practice. So that's the first, I would say. Second, I would say, is that it naturally creates a great faculty or professional development demand, because, for example, for my university, the faculty who's going to get into a COIL collaboration now suddenly facing not domestic students, but also international students to teach together. So then they feel like, oh, I have to improve my speaking skills, I have to improve my teaching skills. So it really creates a natural need for improving their teaching and understanding more about the learning. And the third thing I would say is that COIL has a collaborative learning as it's a very important component because it's in the name, as you can see. So by designing collaboration task properly, then it provides a very good active learning with sometimes challenge-based learning in an international context for the students. And which is something that at the higher educational level, we want the students to actually do that so that they have this expected graduate attributes that includes many things such as transversal skills or competencies. So those are the main things. I think there are many other merits as well that should be promoted. But before COVID, I used to say those things. And now with the COVID, why take the challenge? It doesn't really necessarily say much anymore because there's not much of a mobility, study abroad opportunities that's available anymore, then they have to resort to something. And then that's the COIL seems to come up on their mind right away. So because of the slow recovery in mobility and then people are thinking about next normal phase that we're going to get into with the COVID or after COVID anyway. So there's not any other choices but to take the challenge.
Yes, it is. Certainly, I think that's a reality we keep coming across in all these podcasts is like what we once thought was impossible or too difficult, all of a sudden is a reality that we had to take on that challenge. There was really no other option. And it's been shown that, you know, we are resilient and sort of adaptable and able to make these changes. So thank you for that. And there are a couple of things that you said there that I want to dig in a little bit later. But one of the things that I'm keen to understand is from a student perspective. So we're talking about the benefits to the institution and why take on this challenge. But you know, we are in the business, especially the international sector, and we are all deeply passionate about creating, you know, those global citizens and developing those intercultural competencies. So I'd be keen to dig a little bit on from Simone, if you can, the benefits specifically to the students. What can you share with us about like the student experience in this?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been developing and teaching COIL courses for around 8 years now. So I really know the patterns that students go through when they start with a COIL course, with a COIL assignment. And usually speaking, well, at least definitely before the pandemic, when everything has been moved online, they were very, very excited when they heard that they were going to do a COIL assignment, because it's very different to their normal classes, their normal face-to-face classes. So they said, oh, this is fantastic. We're going to be doing something online with students abroad. So they're really, really excited about doing this. And of course, they might have some anxiety, such as the language barrier. Will their English be good enough to communicate with students abroad and things like that? But usually the general feeling within the classroom is excitement. But as it goes along, as they start to complete the assignment, that can change for some students. And of course, some really thoroughly enjoy the experience and they make friends with their virtual classmates, and they're following each other on Facebook or Instagram. But some other ones come up against challenges with either communication or getting the task done. And this is also part of the learning experience as well. And at some point, even some of them want to stop completely with the assignments, that I've had enough of this. I don't want to do it. They're not participating, etc., etc. But of course, at this point, it's also the facilitator's role, the teacher, the person who's guiding the students in this process, to step in and say, hey, this is part of the learning. This is part of dealing with people who are not the same as you, have a different culture. They live in a different country. They have a different type of life to you. Let's try a different approach. And that's where the learning, the communication skills, the intercultural competencies are developed as well. And through this process, they get through it and they complete the assignment. And even at the end of the course, you might ask them, okay, how did it go? And they say, no, I didn't like that at all, because it really took them pushed them out of their comfort zone with something that they were really confronted with, that they had to deal with this either conflict or uncomfortable situation, which they did not enjoy. But if you ask them a few months down the line, they'll actually say, actually, I really enjoyed that. I really learned a lot from that experience. So immediately after the course, some of them might not really give a great evaluation. But if you ask them even the next year, they say, that was actually one of the best parts of my study, the COIL experience. So that's from one thing of what I can see from developing and teaching these COIL courses. But I'm also doing research into COIL and the effectiveness of COIL and helping students develop intercultural competencies. And what I've discovered, because I did a control study with a group that didn't have a COIL experience, and two groups that did. And one of the groups that did have the experience was already had an international mindset. So they chose to study an English top program. There were different international students within the class. So they already had that mindset, that curious, open-mindedness these competencies to begin with. So we gave them the COIL assignment, and we also gave students who had absolutely no idea they were going to get a COIL experience whatsoever. We just dumped it on them. So they weren't choosing for an international program or anything like that. And what I see from the results of my research is that the students who already had this international mindset, they did not increase their intercultural competencies that significantly, while the students who didn't choose for the COIL experience, who didn't choose for the international experience, did have a significant increase in their intercultural competencies. So this really tells us a lot that the students who really need this this experience, this COIL experience, are the ones who are not going abroad, the ones who don't have that on their radar. These are the ones that we really need to help in developing these competencies. And this is why internationalization at home is so important for our students. And I think I'll probably say this later on as well. I really think that internationalization at home and COIL is like the basics of internationalization. It's like internationalization 101. And it's not, I hear this notion sometimes that, virtual exchange COIL is the poor man's study exchange or study abroad. And that's absolute rubbish. COIL is for everybody. It's the basics of internationalization. Everybody should have this opportunity in their first year, or at least in their studies. So that's what I think about the student experience so far. I don't know, Keiko, do you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, I was agreeing to the last thing that you mentioned about the ones who really have a good impact from COIL is exactly the ones who do not have opportunity, will not have opportunity to do any other kind of international experience or practices while they're on the campus. And they were the one actually starting from the very bottom, understanding or sensitivity, but then they have a big leap of change just over one COIL experience. And that's like an eye opener. We have some students who have actually went through from the very big low level, just to put it that way for the lack of a word. But then he got so excited about it. He took another COIL, and then he started to decided that he's going to study abroad. He never thought about that before. And then he did it. And then after that, he now is actually pursuing an MBA in Germany. So this kind of an episode, and it's I'm seeing this sporadically happening on campus. So what COIL can have as an impact to a student, it can be really quite remarkable.
Those are great stories. And, it begs the question, what type of, you talked about different groups who self-select as being interested in COIL work, and groups who just had it sort of dropped on them as a surprise. So I'm wondering if you can share, Simone and Keiko, both of you, what your thoughts are on particular subject matters that are particularly suitable to COIL. Or is it your opinion that, it's all suitable?
Yeah, I would say that it's all suitable, but it depends, I suppose, on where you can in your curriculum, where you can fit this in as well. So finding a partner who also has some flexibility within their course as well, so they can co-design an assignment together. And that kind of brings me to another point as well, is that the assignment is very, very important that you give students. So COIL is not just like, I'm gonna set up an online session for 45 minutes with a university in Canada, and my students can talk to their students for 45 minutes. That's not the idea. It's really that the assignment has to be really a collaborative assignment, in the sense that students need to rely on each other to complete it. So if they don't have that challenge there, and then it's just they're all working on their own islands, and that they don't learn through this scaffolding, through this collaboration. So that's the thing that I would say, that you can do this in any discipline, but you would have to be creative and seeing within your discipline, within your subjects, within your courses, where you can fit this, and finding a partner who also has the same ideas and the same flexibility as you might have, to see where you can build this into your course. But I think it can be done in any subject, and it benefits any discipline as well. It's fantastic. Thank you, Keiko.
All right. Yeah, Keiko, did you have anything else? And for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, Keiko was nodding the whole time. So
Just if I were to say which subject or the students who that do I want them to be involved in COIL, I would definitely say the students in STEM, because it might be difficult to squeeze the COIL component into their curriculum, but they are the ones that who needs this sensitivity skills that they need to cultivate, because they will actually be working in a virtual team together, international team together. That's what the science is all about, really, for the next generation, even more so. So I would want more STEM subjects to be involved in COIL. In fact, we are pushing very hard at our university to do the science and the engineering professors to have a little, even a tiny component of COIL, so that this is going to happen.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, it's also, I mean, we talk a lot about the students, but this is also a learning experience for the lecturers, the academics, and through this process, they also learn. And this is where you can, as an institution, you can find the intrinsic motivation within your academics to do this. If you can say, okay, you're gonna, if you take this on, you can learn more about your subject. You can find another partner abroad and do joint research together on a specific subject in your field. So it's also finding those intrinsic motivations and showing what lecturers can get out of this as well. And I think that's very important. And training them too. So as I said earlier, the lecturer takes on the role of a facilitator and has to facilitate students through this intercultural learning journey. So they need to be given a set of skills in which they can help, with which they can help students progress through this course as well. So there are things to consider within institutions as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for that. And when you talked there about like what students or what facilitators or instructors, faculty might need, but what kind of support can a university or an institution provide specifically to students who are participating in COIL projects? If Keiko, if you could want to take that.
Or because it's more of a the domain of IT tools. That's, I guess, the infrastructure is the basic thing that I think institution needs to provide. Currently, with this pivoting online with the COVID time, this environment support seems to got much improved, really. But before, it was sort of up to the students whether they have access to, say, particular software, or to they have to install the particular things. Just because of this, they're involved in the COIL course. It was very sporadic. But now it's starting to have more coherent understanding where, okay, we have to provide this basic need. It's getting better, but I would definitely say that is the first support that students will need. Another is our students, particularly when I think about my students in Japan, they are definitely a digital native generation, and they're very good with the smartphones, and they know what to do with that things on a smartphone, but they may not know how to use that for academic or learning purpose either. So you need to actually provide them orientation of transitioning, their skills to a learning practices skills, the skills that they can apply to that different domain. So that part, I think that's a part that the instructors have to bring onto the classroom. And that would be another kind of a soft support.
Awesome. Yeah. Simone, anything to add there?
Yes, I think Keiko mentions everything that we can do to prepare and support our students for taking on a COIL course. But I also think for institutions to really embed this, they also need to invest in their lecturers, and that would mean giving more time to their lecturers to develop the skills needed to develop and to teach a COIL course, but also the time to develop the course, to find the partner and to sit down online with their partner and develop this COIL assignment. Because I know if you are really to develop a good collaborative assignment, it takes time. It takes time because you're also communicating with another lecturer who comes from a different institution with a different culture. different background. So I think it's not like developing a regular course within your program. It takes more time than that. And that's something that really needs to be addressed in a lot of universities, to give extra time to lecturers to develop these kinds of courses.
Okay, so we've talked about why institutions might take on this challenge. We've talked about what it means for institutions and their students. We are the Climate Action Network for International Educators. And I'd be super keen to get both of your perspectives on what is the opportunity with COIL as it is connected to sustainability and specifically, us climate action. But, there's certainly some SDG connection to like quality education for all, and we talk about inclusion, and there's the social justice piece about Simone, when you called it rubbish, that this isn't about, it's not the poor man's internationalization, right? So I'd be keen to hear both of your perspectives, and maybe starting with you, Keiko, on sort of your thoughts on how COIL what the opportunity is with respect to climate impact specifically, and then inclusion as well.
Well, I mean, definitely, it's reducing carbon footprint for sure by opting out to the COIL mode of international education, that itself. But more importantly, or I should say additionally, perspectives of education for sustainable development mindset. So bringing the topic of SDGs, for example, into a COIL collaboration class design. By itself, you can actually make the students be more aware of this SDGs and what they need to do. They will start thinking about what are the relative issues around them locally and globally. And then they can even think about solutions with the overseas partner students as well. So those are very much of a first step into heading the directions that we want to head. That's from the educational perspectives. I would definitely say this is a strong impact for climate actions, but any other goals in the SDGs.
Yeah, I think, what has the pandemic also taught us now? Like everything's been put online, and we've had to collaborate online across borders to problem solve. So this is like a test run for the future, I think, the pandemic. So, I mean, I totally agree with what Keiko says, but on a different topic, I kind of want to mention that there also is this notion that there should be mobility for all, and all students, we want to be inclusive. So all students should be able to travel abroad. And I feel that this is a little bit of a romantic notion. And of course, we want all students to have an international opportunity and develop these intercultural competencies. But if we were to send all of our students abroad, this is not, first of all, not feasible, and it's also not sustainable. So it doesn't make sense. So what we could do is we use COIL as, we use internationalization at home, and COIL being one of these tools. We use that to help our students develop intercultural competencies, so they have that basis, they have that level of competencies, and then from then on we can build it up, we can make it more complex, and of course, students can have the opportunity to go abroad, to study abroad, but we have to be strategic in this and look, maybe they travel regionally, so to the neighboring countries to develop these intercultural competencies. Or every university has a green policy in which, it's really clear how much, carbon is emitted through their travels. And maybe there's a grant included that they can get a train ticket or something along the lines of this, so that these strategies are in place for reducing our carbon footprint. But the notion of mobility, that the COIL is for, I know, and Keiko, you said this too, that it can encourage students to go abroad, and that's fantastic, but the notion to have all of our students traveling abroad, that's just not feasible, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, Keiko, I think in one of the, either a conversation or I think it was a note, we talked about you mentioned, I thought this was so great, which was, what do we want the students to gain from physical study abroad anyway? What do we want them to gain? And where can we improve COIL? COIL's just getting started, right? And so Simone alluded to that, but Keiko, I'd love to sort of hear the driver behind that. Like, what did we want them to learn anyway? Physical study abroad.
Yeah.
When they're traveling abroad, generally speaking, there are more availability, accessibility now getting there. Before COVID, I'm talking about, and particularly I see the tendency in Japan and more maybe in Asia and Pacific, this might be a tendency, but you're treating studying abroad as like almost a wastebasket. You just throw in there, send them out to a foreign country, they come back with some gains. And we don't know exactly what those gains are, but we're just going to send them out anyway. And then we count the numbers of students. If we go out as a mobility number, and then we call it internationalization. And then now we have to add a halt now and thinking, okay, what did we want them to actually learn anyway at the destination? Now that we have to actually be very careful, do we want to send the students abroad or not? And if you really wanted to decide to send them, what is it that we want them to make sure that they are learning there, and how long they should be staying there if they're doing it? At the same time, what is it that we want and we can actually expect the students to gain in an online mode of international education? So in other words, for COILers too, that we actually are challenged by the situation, that we need to define further what is it that we want the students actually learn getting out of this COIL practices, and how the COIL design should actually be adjusted to that purpose. So that's I would just say 2 layers to that.
Exactly, that's exactly it, right? So what competencies do students need, by the time they graduate, and how can they acquire these competencies? And that brings us to there's research on this, that students have gone abroad and their intercultural level has intercultural competencies have not developed at all compared to when they leave and when they come back. So I think it's really looking at what intercultural competencies do universities want their students to have by the time they graduate. What do employers, what are employers looking for as well? And then looking for ways in which students can acquire these competencies. And that brings us back to COIL as well, that more empirical research needs to be done into COIL to see what students are actually learning, how they're learning, and how is it effective in them developing intercultural competencies. And that's why I am doing more research into COIL. And there are many different organizations now as well with Evolve who are also doing further research into COIL to see how students are learning through using this tool. So totally agree with what Keiko has to say there.
That's great. And I think it takes us to the next step. And you talked about the transformation. You saw that transformation where maybe they didn't love their COIL experience at first, but looking back, they were transformed, right? Like when you talked about the student experience. Yeah. And so that's kind of everything that we're trying to achieve, and what we're trying to design is transformational experiences. That is what we say. And when we talk about like romanticizing international education and the things that we tell ourselves as practitioners, of course, people are having transformational experiences, but there's a lot of questions. Are they sort of justly distributed within student groups? Are they worth the carbon emissions that they're putting out? And so there's some really real questions there. And I'm really looking forward to more of that research. I know when you were talking at the summit, you're just starting to dig into it and doing more of it. So that'll be really great. And so I think that there's obviously a ton of potential, and you guys both alluded to it. So say that, where does one start? Is this tend to be faculty driven? Is it out of, there's a lot of international education practitioners out of international offices? Where have you, each of you, if you can share your experience, maybe Simone, where it started from at your institution, or what you've commonly seen, and how to get started and sort of do more of that?
Well, I've done a whole circle right around. So when I started, I was really looking for exchange partners to send my students abroad. So that was my drive. I wanted to send all my students abroad. I wanted to get them abroad. And we had this really, we had this really nice partner, SUNY New Paltz, actually, State University New Paltz. They had a great communication and media department there, and I wanted to send my students there, but they were not accepting any students because of capacity reasons. So that's what got me involved in COIL, because John Rubin, the founding father of COIL, he was, I think I was introduced by the head of the New Paltz University. I was introduced to John through him, and that's how he told me all about COIL. So that's when I first started up my COIL course, and that was back in 2012 and 2013. And I just thought, like, why are we not doing this more? You know, this just makes, it's like, it just makes total sense to that we should all be doing this. It adds so much, it enhances the course so much more. And so that's when I got started with it back in 2013, 2012. And then from then on, I just included COIL courses within my own courses. And then I moved that was when I was working at Utrecht University. And then I moved from Utrecht to Den Hague. And Den Hague really wants to be the most international university in the Netherlands. So they're really investing a lot in internationalization and try to give the COIL a boost as well. So that's kind of where I started and where I am now with COIL. And of course, I don't know if we'll discuss this again, but my climate story, you know, was actually when I was flying back from Helsinki, and I started reading David Wallace's Wells book, you know, An Uninhabitable Earth. And it just hit home for me at that point. Like, what am I doing? Why am I sending all my students abroad as well? This is crazy. This is so bad for the planet. And then I just started, we have to really focus on COIL as a way to help our students develop international competencies as opposed to sending them abroad. So, and that's where I am now, I suppose.
I love that your COIL story specifically started with the intention of sending everyone abroad. I love that. It's like,
that's it.
That was what we've known, right? And so when we're introduced to this other completely valid way of developing international competencies, like, really powerful. That's so cool. I didn't know that. And Keiko, what about you?
Well, like I was saying before, that I was doing more, you know, bringing technology, ICT into classrooms. The blended learning was on my mind anyway. And it just so happened I was doing an e-portfolio at the time in 2014. And I was talking at the conference, and it so happened that a keynote speaker was John. And we actually met in the backstage, and then we had a lunch together. And that's how I started to learn what a COIL is. It's like, oh, this is cool. So I decided to do 3 of COIL courses myself. I have to just, you know, give it a try myself and see how it's like. And the students' reaction was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And they were just, you know, at the time in 2014, if you remember, the technology is not that savvy as is now. It was a Skype. It was only availability, I think, more or less. And then there was the Google, I guess, Drive and things like that available, but not quite, you know, as of today. The digital availability was not there, but then somehow we got it through with that, you know, here and there are some challenges, but then the students did not even mind about this fact that, you know, sometimes you didn't get to have connections going well. They just had a blast and then just learn a lot more. And, you know, I'm sorry about the dog. That we got I got the best student evaluation than I think the past years that I've been teaching on campus. So I got now confirmation that this is really something that we should bring into our university. And at the same time, around that time, just so happened that our university was going for the next 10-year internationalization policy. They were to develop it, and I was appointed to become a senior international officer then. So I needed to propose some, and I thought, all right, I'm going to actually propose this COIL as internationalization at home policies, which was not really that recognized in Japan at all at that time. So it was a really innovative kind of suggestion, but universally, luckily, that senior administration liked that idea. So now it's actually scribed in our internationalization policy at the Kansai University. So it gives me a very good legitimate reasons to promote COIL now.
Awesome. And so more questions. You know, I'm super curious about the challenges of implementing COIL. What I would just say, like, what are some common barriers to getting us started?
Or faculty person? Or is it institutionally? I mean, it depends on
both. Those are really good perspective, because we have some faculty who are CANIE podcast listeners and a lot of international practitioners as well. So if you could share both of your perspectives. Yeah.
Get started as a baby step, as one person, a faculty member. That's how I started it. I think that's how Simone started as well. So the first step is just give it a try. Really, if you have a overseas a colleague of yours, maybe you have international colleagues that you studied together or something like that, who's at a faculty position and overseas somewhere. That might be a first thing to do. I think starting a COIL now in 2021 is much easier than starting a COIL in 2013. For sure. The environment's more welcoming as well. So I think I would just strongly recommend that first step as that. But in order to actually sustain it and, say institutionalize it or having it more presence on campus, not just your thing, then you need a team. So in order to build a team, you need that yourself as a faculty, maybe some more people joining into the community. And also you need to have a buy-in to somebody with a bit of authority in a division, for example, Division of International Affairs or something like that. And also you might need to talk to somebody from Center for Teaching and Learning, and that they actually, hopefully they'll like that, your suggestion as well. So you're creating a team within your own campus. And by that, I think that has a good step into the milestones to head towards.
Great.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I mean, I also think that it depends on the institution as well, because every institution is different. Every institution has a different infrastructure where things are placed within the university as well. And some can be centralized, some can be decentralized. So that can make things a little bit tricky. But from my experiences, in addition to what Keiko said as well, is that, I think it's also repetition within your own institution as well, is constantly keeping that virtual exchange COIL network going within an institution, constantly having workshops going or sessions on best practices. So it's always there and people are always reminded of it and know that, this is something that's possible that I can do. And seeing other examples of what other lecturers are doing gives them inspiration to do it within their own courses as well. And another point would also having the COIL course embedded within your programs and embedded within the exam regulations, so the exam assessment. Because sometimes what happens is you might get a very enthusiastic lecturer who's like, I want to do this and set up a beautiful COIL course, but that lecturer might move on to something else, and then the COIL course disappears because they don't have, the engine is gone. So it's important to have it embedded in the exam regulations as part of the assessment. So if that lecturer leaves, the next lecturer takes it over. The program has to continue with it. It has to go ahead. A partner has to be found, and so on. So I think that's really, at least here in the Netherlands, what is quite important to have it included in the exam regulations. And what else could as I said as well, giving more, and it depends on the infrastructure and how things operate within universities, but giving maybe an extra reward in terms of time or perhaps something else to lecturers to take on this COIL course as well, because it is extra work. It does take more time to develop a COIL assignment. So those kind of things I think are important. I think, and as Keiko says, it's much easier to include this within your courses now because everything is online. So it's not as scary anymore to work online. That's it. Okay.
No, that's super helpful. I think between sort of Keiko suggesting like different partners within an institution, and then as well, like some practical things to keep in mind, things that an institution or whoever's in charge of internationalization can do to embed that within the institution and who the different players are. So this is it's almost like you guys have worked together before.
It was a long time ago.
face the many challenges within the institution, similar experiences that really just comes down to a common ground.
Even across borders, right?
Yeah.
So that's so funny. So I actually didn't know when I asked you both to be on this podcast individually that you guys had worked together, which is amazing. So since I've got you both here and there's this new information on the table, I was wondering if we can wrap up with you sort of sharing some of the best practices and also best memories of when you guys did your work together, which was, I guess, in 2018 between Kansai University and the Hague University of Applied Sciences, right? So in 2018. So guys, share your story.
There was that one COIL course that we, if you're talking about that COIL course collaboration, the professor instructor wasn't, the main professor that did the COIL collaboration was not me. It was actually a professor done by myself. But it was, and then there was another professor at the Hague that worked together as well. So we've had COIL collaborations in a couple of times. And the course that collaborated from our end was gender studies, I think it was. And another one was critical thinking, methods of critical thinking is the subject. So it's a more of a general educational level undergraduate targeted class. So it was a really, anything can be a topic for that course as long as it has, goes into a critical thinking methodology. So it was easy to actually adjust to a task design for COIL. And I think what they did was they analyzed Trump's Twitter messages. Actually, at that time, it was an interesting task collaboration project that they decided to do. But what I would say as a beautiful story that came out of the collaboration, as you asked, is that because we've actually worked on the collaboration together, we are now formed a university level agreement between Hague and Kansai University because of that. So it has a very nice ending or continuing engagement, I guess.
Yeah, that's the advantage of it as well, is because when you get institutions that know what COIL is, like Kansai and Den Haag, then it's so much easier to develop COIL courses together as well, because everybody is familiar with what it is, they've heard it before, and that makes the process go much quicker, I think, as well. And there's more support as well behind the lecturers who are developing the courses. And another point as well, what you just said is that we've made exchange partners now, but there's also the idea of strategic COIL partners as well. So using certain institutions, certain universities as strategic partners to make COIL courses. So that like I'm going to be able to rely on this university to use for so many years in the future, that they will develop COIL courses with us. And that's kind of in different areas as well. So that's quite an interesting development that is happening. And we do it with Kansai, but we are also doing it with Coventry University in the UK as well, that we have several COIL courses running with Coventry in different disciplines, because they're also very active with COIL. So this is a nice development that is developing now these days.
Well, thank you so much to you both for sharing that story. I love, I don't know that continuity of a relationship would have been something that I thought about as like a critical component of ongoing COIL. And that makes obviously perfect sense. And this is why I'm not in an institution. But I just thank you so much to the both of you for being here. I know that I learned a lot. And I think that this allowed for much deeper exploration of what you both had shared with the CANIE community at our international summits in May and November. So thank you both so much for taking the time. Any final parting words, hopes for COIL, dreams for COIL?
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit, it's a little bit more of an opinion, it's not opinion, but what I also hear though about virtual exchange in COIL is that I'm constantly hearing that like, oh yeah, but that's also very bad for the environment, because, it's the energy consumption and the water that goes into, powering electricity, so yeah, that's that's quite bad as well, you know, video streaming, etc. And that really also needs to be nipped in the bud, that it is has a tiny impact compared to flying somewhere, you know, going on a transatlantic flight, you know, or something like that. So it's really like, you know, to really nip that one in the bud, to say that, oh yeah, you know, using COIL for students to develop intercultural competencies is just as bad for the environment as them flying abroad. That is not the case at all. It's the lesser of the evils, let's put it that way. So that's an important note.
I love that final point. Because I just came across a study about an astronomy conference in Europe, where they compared their previous years to the virtual one they did, and it was 3,000 times less of a size of a carbon footprint, accounting for all the Zoom and the amount of time that people spent on Zoom and server uploads and downloads and energy consumption. Yeah. So it's like 3,000 times less. I was like, no. I was so happy. I was like, I know that has nothing to do with international education, but here's a fun study that I found about conferencing. So you can apply that same logic to of mobility. And so that's a really powerful, period at the end of the COIL sentence.
And it would be also nice to get, like, you know, to create like a bank of all of these different studies that give these statistics of what is worse for the environment, to build up this bank of information.
Girl, I got you. That is coming on the new CANIE website. So hopefully, yes, we are going to be having lots of resources on carbon carbon impact science. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, carbon impact science. Yes, yeah. And I get there's also conflicting studies as well all the time. So
yeah. And so Keiko, over to you to sort of wrap this up for us.
Well, I don't know if it's going to wrap up for the whole session today, but I would say that it's, you know, going for global learning for all, the inclusive education, with that mindset, and COIL definitely is giving us a lot to think about, and also maybe solutions and some light to answer those big challenges as well. I hope that COIL, as I think Simone mentioned it earlier, that is not considered to be something that limited people can only appreciate. You know, and institutions, it's really a mission to the institutions, of the homework. They should not make COIL program or practices to be limited to a certain level of a certain population on campus. It should be making sure that it's an inclusive methodology available for all students, including not just the traditional students, but non-traditional students as well. And I'll say this strongly because Japan's getting more of, you know, shrinking age population for that traditional students. We're facing for non-traditional students coming onto campus. We have to make sure those practices like COIL is available to everyone. So I hope that would be the direction we're going for, and I hope that I have some contribution to that too.
Honestly, you two ladies ending on the combination of carbon reduction action and inclusivity and justice in what COIL can bring. I think those are the two most perfect points to end on. And so with that, I think I just want to thank you one more time for spending this time with us. It really flew by. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you on our next episode. The CANIE Climate Dialogues podcast is engineered by Diego Mendez, who is based in Vancouver. He edits these episodes together, making us look and sound super professional. And also, he uploads these episodes to wherever you listen or watch this podcast.